Excellency Zainab Bangura, Director General of the United Nations Office in Nairobi, the Interim Dean at the Graduate School of Media and Communications at Khan University, Professor Nancy Booker, former Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General in Somalia, and Chairperson of the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, Fatiha, Serour, Madam Bettina Ambach, Founding Director, Wayamo Foundation, members of the legal fraternity, members of the Fourth Estate, and our Sudanese colleagues in the diaspora, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to the Kasumali A. Sumji Auditorium for this International Justice Symposium at the Graduate School of Media and Communications. We're grateful to the university and the faculty for their agreement to host us here. And at this time, because while we're here, really appreciate it if you'd indulge me with a 1-minute silence for those who have fallen in the conflict that is still raging in Sudan today. Kindly be upstanding for 1 minute silence. We mark the same respect for others suffering in other zones of conflict. Thank you. We acknowledge the presence of members of the African Eminent Panel of Jurists, Lawyers, and Human Rights Advocates, the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, and Bettina will go more into detail with that when she delivers her remarks. We also want to acknowledge and especially welcome faculty and students of the Aga Khan University and sister institutions, two yet to join us. That's the United States International University and the Riari University, but welcome already the Kenya School of Law. The theme for the event, as we know, is a transition from where? Transition to what? Exploring transitional justice efforts in an ever-changing world. The organizers have noted that as we speak, human rights violations are being committed on a daily basis in Sudan, and as it was felt that an immediate action was called for to discuss and possibly enhance the capabilities of existing monitoring and transitional justice mechanisms, and that forms the main focus and thrust of our discussions today. Our first panel will discuss those issues, and they will follow after our opening remarks. So it's my pleasure at this time to invite Professor Nancy Booker, Associate Professor and the Interim Dean at the Graduate School of Media and Communications, to deliver her opening remarks. With a round of applause, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
That doesn't sound like a very good morning. I know there's a cup of tea that we will get at some point, but you're welcome to the Aga Khan University's Graduate School of Media and Communications and to the University Center here in Nairobi. I will make my opening remarks, and I will do something that I usually discourage a lot of my students from doing, because when you have a lot of distinguished guests and you do not want to leave out anybody, we have a lazy way of doing it, which we say all protocols observed. Which is something that I do not like and I discourage my students from doing. But I think a lot of our distinguished guests joining us this morning are recognized and appreciated for being here. It is a great pleasure and honor to welcome you in joining us today for this very important and a timely conversation. I extend a very warm welcome to those of you who are joining us here at the University Center for the very, very first time. And I'm very delighted that as part of our distinguished guests this morning is one of our AKU board members, Justice Othman Chande. Karibu sana. Now, as I welcome you to AKU, I'm doing this on my own behalf and on behalf of the school, but also on behalf of the leadership of the university. And some of the people that have worked in putting this together will be speaking to us shortly. But we are also very delighted that we are hosting this important conversation as part of our AKU at 40 celebrations, which we are marking this year as a university. AKU in East Africa is not 40 years old, we're just about 23 years old, but AKU globally is 40 years old, and we are marking our 40th anniversary celebrations for the entire year this year. When Bettina and Judy reached out and asked whether we could partner to host this symposium, I was delighted for this simple reason, that we are moving this conversation from boardrooms, from hotels, to where the people are, to the universities, to where learning happens. And we couldn't have chosen a better place and time. And I'm hoping that you will all feel that way by the end of the day today. And I'm really excited that we have students joining us from other universities later on today to be part of this important conversation. As a media and communication school, we believe that media plays an important role in transitional justice. The whole range of the processes and mechanisms that societies employ to address violations of human rights during transitions and the respect of human rights. We have live examples from this country. A case in point is the 2007 general elections that many of us still remember, the post-election violence. And perhaps even more recently, what's happening in Shakahola, where the media was barred from coverage. And as we recognized at the beginning, the current situation in Sudan. Media is integral in shaping public discourse, promoting accountability, fostering reconciliation, but more importantly, it documents, lest we forget. Earlier this year, I was privileged to join a media awards team that was reviewing the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Media Africa Award for local journalism. We received 199 submissions from 28 countries, and one of the winning entries was a story by Raquel Mungai from Africa Uncensored, Kenya, for her film, Scars of the Vote. And as a panel of the jury, this is what we said as our citation to her winning entry. 15 years ago, Kenya was close to a full-scale civil war. Turmoil erupted after the federal presidential election. 1,100 people died in the days following the event. This violent crisis left its mark in the collective memory of the nation. Raquel Mungai goes on a journey to visit those whose scars have been the deepest. Parents who lost their children, citizens who got burned, tortured, and almost died. In her work, Scars of the Vote, she blends pictures from the past with the current struggle for justice and the question how the survivors feel about the latest election in 2022. Her video is informative, heart-wrenching, sometimes even hard to watch, and I struggled to watch it. But she connects very intimately with her protagonists who openly speak about their personal traumas and losses. However, Raquel never puts herself in the foreground. She's on the ground, listening carefully, and lets the words of her protagonists speak for themselves, and thereby deeply touching the audience. Lest we forget, that story reminds us of the many unanswered questions in the minds of many people today and continue to remain unanswered. And that depicts a part of the media. But for media to do this accurately, ethically, and in a complete form, it is not lost on us that journalists need to be adequately trained and prepared to report on human rights proactively and instructively for a society to be better. Reporting on human rights often focuses on violations rather than the respect for human rights. And this is because violations are more prevalent than the respect for them. It is also more compelling as it responds to one of the news values which we have taught for a long time and which reporters use to select stories: conflict. And in some instances, we have violated human rights as we cover those violations. The conceptualization that journalism is for all human beings, regardless of race, nationality, gender, or geographical location, places a huge responsibility on journalists to be able to report effectively on human rights violations, and that journalists who use the freedom of expression to guide their practice must also not be seen to abuse the fundamental rights they seek to protect. And it is with this realization that we partnered with Journalists for Human Rights as the Graduate School of Media and Communications to develop a curriculum on human rights reporting for universities and colleges across the country as a guide to teaching. And Mustafa from JHR is supposed to be here. I don't see him, but I'm sure he's joining us. And I just want to say thank you for investing in that initiative. We have a packed agenda today, but one that promises to be insightful in the transitional justice approaches and mechanisms that have been used in recent years. I will sit back as a good student today, listen to the experts, and as my colleagues and I learn from you and we find ways of incorporating the learnings in our everyday work and interactions with journalists from across the region. I end with a quote from our Chancellor, His Highness the Aga Khan, where he says, "The search for justice and security, the struggle for equality, for opportunity, the quest for tolerance and harmony, and the pursuit of human dignity, these moral imperatives which we must work towards and think about on a daily basis." And my prayer is that this will guide our discussions today. Asanteni sana, I thank you all, and karibu.
Thank you, Professor Nancy Booker. It's now the turn of our director of the foundation, the Wayamo Foundation, Bettina Ambach, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you, Kojo. For the sake of time, all protocols observed. I know what you said, but please allow me. Anyway, thank you, Professor Nancy Booker, for hosting us here at the university. We're very happy about this partnership. It makes a lot of sense for Wayamo. Wayamo has a strong media background. That's where we come from. And although now many of our activities are concentrating on international criminal justice and human rights violations, nevertheless, we are convinced that this only makes sense if you have a strong, educated media who can also report about it. So I think it makes a lot of sense to be here and also to have many university students here. And especially I want to greet now, this was later in my speech, but it doesn't matter, that we have also representatives from the Sudanese diaspora here. It's a big pleasure to have you here with us. Let me also thank you, and I think you're representing also the German embassy, the Dutch and German foreign ministries, who have generously supported our Nairobi events, this one and also the last 2 days where we organized a workshop on documenting human rights violations. This is part of a 3-year project on strengthening justice and accountability in Sudan and the East African region. So when we started planning this event in March, we were planning to invite Sudanese lawyers, human rights activists, journalists from Khartoum, from Darfur. That was the original plan. Until mid-April, debates on transitional justice were on everybody's lips in Khartoum. You all know this. This was discussed in all circles. And then tragically, everything changed on 15th of April, when the armed conflict between the two generals we all know broke out. All of our local colleagues now are literally in a struggle for survival. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that what we have been and will be discussing here is not merely academic. It matters to people right now on the ground in Sudan who are caught within a spiral of violence. And as I already said, as on a happier note, we're happy to have Sudanese diaspora here. And we will make sure that all what is happening today will be recorded professionally, put into nice packages, and shared with all our colleagues in Sudan. We are also very happy to have reunited 4 current and 2 on hiatus members of the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability. Fatiha Serour from Algeria, Aïchatou Mindaudu from Niger, Navi Pillay from South Africa, Betty Murungi, who just stepped out. She's okay, from Kenya, as you probably all know. And the two hiatus on hiatus members, Mohamed Chande Othman and Zainab Bangura from Sierra Leone. Fatiha, I think you will later perhaps mention a few more things about AGJA, and if not, we can do this in the discussion. Over the next few hours, I invite all of you to think about different existing transitional justice tools and what they have to offer to address serious violations of human rights. From truth commissions, war crimes tribunals, reparation schemes, evidence gathering mechanisms, to security sector reform and amnesties. We will hear and learn about initiatives to document international crimes and human rights violations for future accountability purposes, and learn that transitional justice can also happen while a conflict is ongoing, especially through evidence gathering mechanisms, which we discussed in detail in the last two days. We will have a conversation about the domestic application of international criminal law and conclude with a panel on a potential renewal moment in international criminal law and address concerns of double standards. So the presentation time of the panels is limited to 10 minutes. And this is due to the fact that we are convinced that the most interesting part very often are the Q&As and interactive sessions after that. So please bear with me today. I will probably be sitting there and I will really watching time. This may be also due to my German descendants, but I want to be respectful for the people also who speak at the end of the day. So please, let's all respect the time. And with these words, I want to finish my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Bettina. German as always. We continue our opening remarks, and Bettina's taken. With that, what has been said by her, it's my pleasure to invite Fatiha Serour, current chairperson of the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, to deliver her remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kojo. Good morning. Salam alaikum, karibu, marhaba. Salam alaikum, why? Because obviously we know it means peace upon you. I will be brief. I will not duplicate what my friends and colleagues are saying, except for the following. Number one is to thank Nancy, first of all, and the school for having us. Number two is to thank you all for being here. To me, your presence is an indication of your commitment to the subject matter. So that's very important. The third thing I wanted to say is to start by speaking very briefly about the relationship Wayamo and AGJA. AGJA being Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, two very important words today. Our group has amazing men and women that have been at the forefront of justice, the fight against impunity, and basically being there to make sure that they are the conscience of the public and those who violate human rights. Wayamo has been an amazing facilitator for the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability, supporting its founding and supporting its work. And I'd like to thank Bettina and her team for making it possible. I think both Nancy as well as Bettina spoke about the subject matter today, which is basically the call and the quest for transitional justice in a troubled world that we are facing today. And that is the context of our meeting today. Why is it troubled? We have recurrent, protracted conflict, but we have new ones. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, and more recently, the conflict in Sudan. And that is very important for us to talk about. Why? Because we know that in conflict, the rules of decency are completely forgotten in terms of respecting human beings, respecting women, respecting the right to live in peace and with development. And that's why we're calling for transitional justice. Why transitional justice and not justice per se? It's basically the fact that traditional justice mechanism through courts and other mechanisms are extremely important without any doubt, but maybe in situations like today, they're not sufficient. And that not everybody who's been violated, not every woman who's been raped or who has seen her family being killed is going to be able to reach a court to be a witness to those violations. And I think transitional justice goes beyond that. And that is the reason why we're here today. And I promise, having attended the past day, in particular, with our colleagues from Sudan and our experts, that it is going to be a challenging discussion today, but any challenge is an opportunity to look at where we can go beyond the current status of affairs, which is not a very pleasant one. So we in AGJA, we always call for the fight against impunity. And I think it is something that is going to come back on the table throughout our discussion. And finally, to just reiterate what my colleagues have said, is that whether it's the media, whether I am a student, or I'm a shopkeeper, whatever, we have, number one, a personal responsibility to support any form of justice, and two, a collective responsibility to call for mechanisms for transitional justice. And so I hope you'll enjoy today. I know I'm going to learn a lot. And I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity for being part of this process. To my colleagues, to you, my friends and colleagues, and I wish you a good day and a safe day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Fatiha Serour.